Imagine coming up with an idea only for someone to steal it and become famous and make millions from it. That's exactly what happened to these wrestlers. In 2011, R-Truth began feuding with John Cena and calling all the young WWE fans Little Jimmies. This evolved into Truth having an imaginary friend named Little Jimmy, who has continued to be part of Truth's character to this day. However, Little Jimmy was plagiarized. Prior to Little Jimmy, fellow wrestler JTG had pitched the idea of having an imaginary puppet character that only JTG and the WWE fans could see. WWE Creative actually responded positively to the idea. However, they and JTG were not exactly on the same page. WWE wanted to use a hand puppet, while JTG wanted the imaginary friend to be a bit more elaborate, like a puppet you would see in a Jim Henson production. Eventually, JTG stopped hearing from WWE Creative, and it appeared the idea had died. However, not long after JTG pitched this idea, R-Truth started having an imaginary friend with him. It seems like WWE Creative took JTG's idea, tweaked it a bit, and gave it to R-Truth. I guess WWE Creative was on a roll of plagiarism in 2011 because it happened to Mark Henry too. By 2011, the World's Strongest Man's career had become very stagnant. Henry wasn't used in many big storylines and took a back seat to a lot of other wrestlers. That would change though when he introduced the Hall of Pain storyline. Henry started not only beating main event wrestlers, but also injuring them and putting them out of action, which is why it was called the Hall of Pain. The storyline also led to Mark Henry winning the World Heavyweight Championship, which was a huge accomplishment. However, the Hall of Pain idea was actually stolen from another wrestler. In the early 2010s, Brodus Clay was absent from WWE to film a movie. When Clay asked what creative plans WWE had for him when he returned, he was told they had nothing, and they suggested Brodus come up with something. Brodus Clay suggested that he become a beast who beats up everyone and ducks them into his Hall of Pain. Brodus was told it was a great idea. However, WWE decided to steal the idea and give it to Mark Henry. Despite having his idea taken from him, Brodus Clay was not bitter about it. Now, it's one thing to steal an idea from an adult. Imagine stealing an idea from a kid and not giving him anything in return. Matt Hardy, as well as his brother Jeff, started wrestling when they were kids and scratched and clawed their way up the ranks of professional wrestling. Eventually, Matt Hardy got the opportunity to send a tape to WCW to try and get a job with the company. Matt Hardy had been wrestling under the name High Voltage and used that in his tryout video.
You see, it is time for a new dawning in the world of professional wrestling, and that ascending force goes by the title of High Voltage.
WCW ended up not hiring Matt Hardy. However, they would steal his name. In the mid-90s, WCW debuted a new tag team consisting of the wrestlers Robbie Rage and Kenny Chaos. WCW needed a name for this team, so remembering Matt Hardy's tryout tape, Rage and Chaos were given the name High Voltage. It was confirmed by wrestlers in the company that yes, the name High Voltage was taken from Matt Hardy, since WCW correctly assumed Matt hadn't trademarked it. Bret Hart was not just a genius in the ring, but outside of it too. Back in the early 90s, Bret Hart pitched a match idea to Vince McMahon that he had come up with before he signed with WWE. It was called a ladder match, where the goal of the fight wasn't to pin or submit your opponent. Instead, wrestlers had to climb a ladder and gain custody of the prize hanging above the ring. Now, to Vince McMahon's credit, he saw the potential of Bret Hart's idea and turned it into a reality. The first WWE ladder match was held in July 1992 and featured Bret Hart defending the Intercontinental Championship against Shawn Michaels. Bret won, but the match wasn't shown on TV or pay-per-view, so most fans didn't know it existed. Instead, the first ladder match broadcast on TV was Razor Ramon vs. Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10. So to most people, Razor and Shawn were the innovators of the ladder match. This upset Bret Hart, since he wanted to be part of the WrestleMania ladder match. This started to build animosity between Hart and McMahon, which would come to a breaking point about 3 years later. Any fan of the Attitude Era will remember Jerry the King Lawler's iconic line.
And every time a beautiful diva would come walking out, I'd say, "Hey, JR, look, puppies!"
Oh, look at Lita, she's got the puppies in the net! Woohoo!
However, it was not the King who came up with the term puppies. Living up to his name, the Road Dogg was actually the one that came up with the juvenile dog nickname. Surprisingly, Road Dogg was not upset by Lawler's thievery and actually took it as an honor that King used his line and made it famous.
So I think it was actually the Road Dogg who came up with the term puppies.
We want to see her puppies!
Now, I must admit, I would have been pretty mad if what happened to Dean Ambrose had happened to me. In 2014, Seth Rollins betrayed his Shield teammates, Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns. Dean ended up feuding with Rollins for several months, with them ending their rivalry in a Hell in a Cell match. To end the feud on a high note, Dean pitched the idea that they'd rip off the canvas of the ring, exposing the boards underneath it. This would make the match extremely brutal, but it was met with hostility. Vince McMahon didn't think fans would understand it, and Triple H actually rolled his eyes at Ambrose's idea. Dean and Seth ended up not exposing the ring boards during their match, but a different match would. 1 year later, Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker were facing off inside Hell in a Cell. During the match, Lesnar ripped off the canvas and exposed the ring boards. The reaction this got from the crowd disproves the thought that fans wouldn't understand it.
I don't know.
The hell is he doing? Lesnar's ripping the ring apart.
On top of that, less than 4 years after Dean pitched the idea, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa would do the same spot during their match at NXT TakeOver Chicago 2, which was overseen by Triple H. Even hardcore WWE fans might not remember Just Joe. He never wrestled on Raw or SmackDown and was relegated to shows like Jacked and Sunday Night Heat. However, Joe did pitch ideas to WWE Creative to try and get a spot on the bigger shows. One of his ideas may sound familiar.
And then I pitched, I said, I'd like to do a thing where I cut my hair real short, wear a suit and tie, because it's right at the tail end of the grunge era. Saying that, the American kids are just a bunch of bums now. They need to cut their hair and get a real job and straighten up and fly right and call our group the moral majority. And he says, I don't really see a lot of motion in that. And I'm like, your whole audience are kids with, crazy hair and piercings. This is ideal, but he wouldn't go for it.
This is almost the exact same idea as the Right to Censor, which is a group of wrestlers who cut their hair, wore a suit and tie, and complained that WWE and its fans were too vulgar. As for Just Joe, he was fired a few weeks before Right to Censor competed at WrestleMania 17. When Hulk Hogan was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, he said this.
And one day, I went to Ford Homer Hesley Armory, and this guy named Superstar Billy Graham. I'm telling you, this guy climbed the second ropes. He hit a double bicep, and I looked at my father and I said, Dad, I want to be just like that guy right there.
It turned out Hulk Hogan was very literal about that. Before Hulk Hogan became a wrestling megastar in the 1980s, Superstar Billy Graham was tearing it up in the 70s. Billy Graham looked like $1,000,000 with beach blonde hair and an unbelievable physique. Graham's arms were so big, he started calling them pythons, and he began ripping off his shirt. That doesn't sound familiar at all, does it?
I mean, this is an insult to Hulk Hogan, but it was a cheap Superstar Billy Graham knockoff. I think he did that.
Now, to be fair to Hogan, other wrestlers like Jesse Ventura copied Billy Graham too. However, Hulk Hogan was the one who got the most mileage out of using someone else's gimmick. What's surprising is that Billy Graham wasn't mad at Hulk Hogan or anyone who stole his character. In fact, he actually took it as a compliment that someone wanted to be like him. Now, this next one isn't stealing, but shows the kind of person Bray Wyatt was, so we need to highlight it. In 2012, fans were introduced to the Eater of Worlds, Bray Wyatt. Rather than your usual energized wrestling character, Bray was a lot quieter, speaking softly while wearing a floral shirt and sitting in a rocking chair. However, there was something unsettling about Bray Wyatt that made him one of the most intriguing and creepy wrestlers on the roster.
What they gonna do, man? What you gonna do to something like me?
However, almost 2 decades earlier, there was another WWE wrestler with an eerily similar persona.
I don't like wrestlers touching me, and I definitely don't want them crawling on me.
This character's name was Waylon Mercy, a soft-spoken yet kind of scary character. Compared to a lot of wrestlers at the time, Waylon Mercy really stood out. Unfortunately, Mercy's career was cut short due to injuries. The good news was that Waylon Mercy's persona was able to be reborn over 15 years later. While at the WWE Performance Center, Waylon was approached by a young wrestler named Wyndham Rotunda. Here's how the story goes.
Wyndham came to me and asked me if I'd mind him, doing something like the Waylon Mercy character, and I told him no. I think that, we kicked around some ideas, and I talked to him for a while, but I think he's done a great job with it.
From here, the Bray Wyatt character was born and became a spiritual successor to Waylon Mercy's character. Now here's the real heartwarming part. Even though Bray Wyatt had more success in WWE than Waylon Mercy, Bray never forgot who helped him get there. In 2019, Bray Wyatt introduced the Firefly Funhouse, which featured a number of creepy children's characters. One of them was named Mercy the Buzzard, and, of course, was based on Waylon Mercy. Not only that, but Waylon himself voiced the character.
Yeah, let's hurry it up. I got stuff to do.
Now, to see what Bray Wyatt did for this young fan, watch this video.